Hey, what's going on, everybody? Back with another video. We're going to jump into the time machine. We're going to Poland, Warsaw Open, to be exact, 1992. And this is a great game between two Ukrainian players, Valery Neverov, who actually came in third place in this tournament, versus fellow Ukrainian Grandmaster Vladimir V.Malaniuk. And if you're a great fan of the Leningrad Dutch defense, then you should know who Malaniuk is. He is one of probably the three top grandmasters who brought the Leningrad Dutch, the modern Leningrad Dutch, into prominence and popularity in the mid to late 80s. There was Malaniuk, then Russian GM Sergei Dolmatov, and Yevgeny Barev. These three grandmasters played some excellent games, scored some beautiful victories, and top grandmasters started looking at the Leningrad Dutch again. Up until that point, it had severely faded in popularity. You see it very rarely, haphazardly here and there, but these grandmasters really brought it into prominence. And then if you look in some games in the 1990s, you'll see young players, Vladimir Kramnik playing the Dutch as black, Veselin Topalov playing the Dutch, Leningrad Dutch as black. So this right here is just basically, a little homage to some of the old school Leningrad Dutch players. But I'm a big fan of the Leningrad Dutch, always have been, and Malaniuk for many years had been one of my favorite players. Unfortunately, he's no longer with us, but I'm happy that we have chess games and chess notations that through them we can keep players' memories alive. So I hope you enjoyed this game. Please hit that thumbs up button. Please consider liking and subscribing. All that good stuff that all the other YouTubers tell you to do. And also check the links below, the donation links, if you're interested in supporting the channel. And let's get right to it. So the game started off D4, F5, knight of 3, knight of 6, C4. I won't bore you with too many opening details. I'll just tell you that the Leningrad Dutch is just a hybrid of the King's Indian defense and the classical Dutch defense. Those of you who are familiar with the King's Indian will know that before the King's Indian, you had what is called the Old Indian system, where the bishop, the dark square bishop that is, was placed on E7 and had a very minimal and passive role in that defense. And somewhere in the 1950s, some Russian grandmasters, Boleslavsky, Bronstein, players like that, say, hey, let's get this bishop more active. Let's give this bishop a promotion. And they started putting the bishop on G7. And these were like the seeds of the modern King's Indian. And you saw a lot of this opening in the Candidates Tournament, Zurich 1953, for example. And these were early King's Indian games. And the same evolution took place in the Dutch, right? For many years, you had the classical Dutch system where the bishop was placed on E7 and had a passive defensive role many times. Alakhan had said one time that the bishop's best place, talking about the dark square bishop, is probably just to get traded off on C3 if you can, right? In the classical, if the opponent plays knight C3, just play bishop B4 and trade it off, right? A la Nimza Indian. So light bulb went off and players said, hey, let's make this bishop great again and put it on B7. So you have your modern King's Indian today featuring the bishop on B7, and you have your Leningrad Dutch featuring the King's Indian bishop, if you will, on G7. And the openings are very related. The King's Indian establishes an early E5 and then plays F5 later on. The Dutch does the same thing in reverse. Dutch establishes early f5, control over the e4 square, and then seeks to play the move e5. And of course, this leads to different and dynamic positions. Notice in the King's Indian, white is often allowed to build up big centers, okay, because white is allowed to control e4 early on. And in the Dutch, black seizes control of e4 right away, and therefore white is not able to establish these big centers. That's why you don't hear of the 4 pawns attack in the Dutch, for example, okay, because black makes it more difficult for white to just seize these central squares early on. However, he pays the price in the weakening of his king side. So there's your little crash course, King's Indian and Dutch comparisons. Let's go. So d6, knight c3. This is your classical Leningrad. At this point, queen e8 can be played. c6 is played. Knight c6 is played. Here is a system that Malaniuk specialized in. Idea is very simple. Establish e5, and then also assist in the king side attack at some point. Black will play moves like h6, g5, bring the queen to g6, or sometimes bring the queen to h5 and start attacking. Okay, I highlighted c7 because that's a sensitive point in black's position, and sometimes white will play the move knight b5 and ask black, hey, where is your queen going? Who's defending this square? And sometimes the knight is then brought to a6 to do just that. This is also one of the reasons moves like c6 are played in different variations. So b3 is played here. Knight c6. Again, with the idea of e5. Knight b5, and Malaniuk just goes back. d5 jumps right in the center. Exchange. And you just basically saw a hybrid of two systems, right? It's queen e8 and knight c6 systems, which is very possible. Bishop b2. The e5 pawn is threatened, but a6 comes, kicking the knight out. Knight e3. And now e4. And one of black's ideas is just to play e6 and start chipping away at this d5 pawn, which is definitely a thorn in black's side, just as the pawn on e4 is a thorn in white side. f3 is played. E takes f3. E takes f3. So white is happy about that to get rid of that pawn, and black plays the move f4. One of the reasons is to stop white from playing f4 and liberating his bishop on g2, and also it gives black the opportunity to bring his own bishop out on c8, which is kind of bad right now because of these pawns right here. This is one of the downsides, right, of playing this way in the Dutch, is that you create this wall that your bishop is running into here. So Malaniuk plays this sacrifice here, f4. He doesn't have to. He can't play e6, right? So say he plays e6 right now, for example, just attacking the pawn chain, and f4. And play can continue, for instance, queen e7, rook e1, and rook d8, for example. All right, there's nothing wrong with this style of play, but this is a position that black did not want to opt for. All right, and again, note the bishop, right? The prospects of this bishop right here. So let's see what happened during the game, though. So f4 happened, and then just simply rook e1. Okay, white doesn't really want to capture that pawn, right? Bust up his pawn structure and then allow moves like knight h5, for example, and again, basically helping the attack for black. So knight h5 was played. Of course, queen d6 is possible. F takes is possible. So knight h5 is played. A provocative move. What it does is try to, of course, if white plays g takes f4, the knight will be happy to land on that square. Okay? The problem is that after bishop takes g7, the long diagonal definitely is a problem for the black king as far as the exposure. But black just hopes to have enough counterplay to offset white's activity on these diagonals. But one of the reasons why this is a provocative move, this knight h5, is because, hey, at the end of the day, black will be happy for white to play a move like g4 and just basically kill his own bishop, and kill his pieces over there on the king side. So bishop takes g7 is first, because remember, the bishop is hanging right on b2. So this is all thematic, right? Get rid of the protector of the diagonal. Knight takes g7, and now we have the knight is fiend kettled. And now queen d4. And d4 is played, and now black takes. H takes g3. And now queen d6. And you can see the double attack on the knight on a3. And the pawn on g3. c5, advancing the pawns. So black gets his pawn back, but only temporarily, because now the rook goes to e7, captures the pawn, and threatens mate. All right, so this position is already critical after only 21 moves. And if you're a Dutch player, expect to be in positions like this. If you like tactical melees, play the Dutch. All right, you'll have your chances. I'll put it like that. You will lose a lot of games quickly. I'm just talking from my personal experience. Hopefully you're a better Dutch player, than I am, but you will lose a lot of brutal games, but you'll win some spectacular games also. You'll win your share. It goes both ways. I'm sure it's like that with a lot of openings, but I guess the more tactical melees you get involved in, the percentage is a bit higher that you'll have these kind of like crushing defeats every now and then, but then you'll also have these beautiful victories, and that's what keeps you going back. It's like you get addicted, to being like on the brink of defeat and winning. You get addicted to the feeling of victory, but it hurts when you lose, I tell you. So here it looks like one of those games for black, like you're just about to get mated. Positionally, white looks well off too, right, with the 4-3 pawn majority. Not only does he have this pawn majority on the queen side, but the pawns on C and D files are advanced. He has a rook on the 7th. He has all the things that you want in the textbook, right? That the Fred Reinfeld instructional books, in his old school chess manuals would tell you that this a good position. But one thing we know about chess is tactics rule. So it doesn't matter how good the position looks. It's like, do the tactics work, right? So let's see what happened here. So black played knight f5. This thwarts the mating attempt, and also threatens a fork. But again, does it work tactically? Is there really a fork here? Is there does white have a problem? The answer is no, because white has seen that he can just play queen e5, and he's offering to trade the queens here. But not only offering to trade the queens, he's also threatening the c pawn. So again, I look at this, it seems like white has the better endgame prospects. So if I'm black, I'm gonna try to avoid this endgame. And Malaniuk agreed, and he played queen h4. I'll give you a quick example. Like if he traded, you would have queen takes, rook takes, Okay, the bishop humbly comes to d7, right? Where else is that bishop gonna go? But you got to connect the rooks, and this is like a problem child. And this is just a sample of what things could look like. And again, is black lost? No, but this is very like a humble, humble position here. And you are really, I think if you're black, you really have to be on your P's and Q's here. I say all of that to say that it seems that it's easier to play as white in this position than it is for black. If you had took two human players of equal strength, I would say that the player with the white pieces would win, more than 50% of the time, maybe 60% of the time from this type of position, 65%. So I think most human players would try to avoid that. Malaniuk is no different. He plays Queen H4 because he's saying, hey, the king, I have the king. I've played F4 to open the F file. The white king is a bit exposed also. So let me pursue that route instead of going into an end game where my opponent really doesn't have anything to worry about as far as an attack is concerned. However, since he's decided to keep the queens on the board with Queen H4, he has to constantly be on the lookout for this mate on the 7th rank. I mean, it's real bad to have these heavy pieces hanging around your drafty king like that. Let's see what happened. He just took the pawn, right? So he not only avoids the fork, right, that we saw earlier, but now he's up another pawn, and instead of a 4-3 majority on the queen side, now it's a 4-2 majority, and you have a clear pass pawn on the D file, only 3 squares away. The bishop can't develop anywhere, right? It's on C8, and consequently, it blocks the rook on A8. So this looks desperate. Also, I want to tell everybody I'm on Twitter. Also, follow Chess Audiobooks on Twitter. I post a lot of critical positions like this one right here. If you go on my Twitter, you'll see this position posted there. So check me out there too. Follow me on there. So in this position, man, it looks like the Grim Reaper is knocking at black's door, right? That thing's just, this is looking like one of those quick knockouts for white, a miniature. However, Malaniuk plays a brilliant move. I'll give you like 5 seconds, right? You could pause. That way you could pause the video, because I know some people like to pause and see if they can figure it out. So you can pause the video, set it up, what have you. So now I'm going to give you the move in 5 seconds. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Malaniuk played bishop d7. That's right. The bishop is not protected by anything. It's just hanging. He said, here, take this piece. White obliged. And now rook a e8, attacking the queen. Queen came back to b2. Notice the queen is still keeping the eye on the g7 square. So if that knight moves anywhere improper, it will be made on g7. However, I want to point something out to all of you guys. Note that all of white's pieces are on the queen side, except the bishop on g2, and the king, of course. And all of black pieces are where? All of black's pieces are on the king side. So black is down a full piece, but it just doesn't feel like it. And this is the idea behind Malaniuk's piece sacrifice here. He just gives away this piece so that all of his remaining pieces are ready to attack. Let's see what happens. So queen b2, knight d4. So again, black is being mindful not to get mated on g7. So look where he places the knight. He blocks the queen's action right on the diagonal, and he's threatening to play rook to e2. So how do you defend rook e2, followed by queen f2, etc.? Well, Knight c2 was played. Another way to defend is by rook d1. Okay, and it has similar ideas, and we'll come back to this position later. This was a very critical position here. But knight c2 was played. Now some of you are saying, well, I will play rook e2 anyway. The problem with rook e2 now is that queen takes d4 just wins. It just wins for white. And you should be able to see this. But if queen takes d4, then just knight takes d4, and the attack is over, and white is just up 2 pieces. Of course, if rook takes c2, then just queen takes h4, and black loses the queen, and again it's over. So this was the idea behind knight c2, and again it's following all the basic chess principles, right? Take the knight off the rim, find your worst piece and try to improve it. If you look at the board, what is the worst piece? Is the knight on a3. He's trading it for he wants to trade it for the knight on d4, which is arguably black's best piece. Black has so many good pieces, but so it's one of his best pieces. So knight c2 looks like a great move. Now what happened was knight e2 check. All right, and now we'll see the downside of that move, knight c2, because temporarily the knight blocks the action of this queen along this rank for defensive purposes. All right, and this is black's time to exploit that. So king f1 is played, and now we're at a critical moment. So after the check, the mate threat is renewed, as you can see highlighted by the arrows on g7. So now what does black do? Frank Marshall once said that you have to play your attack in such a way that when the fire is out, it ain't out. Right? In other words, you have to keep it going somehow. How do you keep this attack going if you're black? Well, black played rook takes f3 check. It's time to throw all the wood in the fire now. Bishop takes f3, and now queen h3. Bishop g2 is played. If king e1, then knight d4 check. King d2, knight takes f3, king c1, and it looks like white might be able to get away, but he just can't make it. King c2, queen d2, and we can see, unfortunately, and white is not able to escape the mate. This is why king e1 not an option here. Instead, bishop g2, fighting with that piece. And notice how I brought up earlier how all of the white pieces were on the queen side. All he has is to defend is the bishop and the king. So even though he's up a full piece, it doesn't mean anything. Queen f5 check, king e1, knight f4 discovered check. So now we have a position kind of similar to the one I just showed you in the variation. He goes back over king f2, right? He doesn't want to get mated. Knight d3. So he parts with the queen, and he's hoping that he can still salvage the game with these passed pawns. Right? He still has a good amount of material. And king g1, knight takes b2, and now c6. So now he starts marching the pawns. Now he plays rook e2. Queen c2 is playable, right? Rook f1, and the idea, of course, is to go to the 7th rank. B takes c6, d takes c6, queen c5 check, king h2, and rook e2. And of course, pinning the bishop and threatening to grab this pawn on c6. But these positions very, very tricky. They get very tricky. And just imagine too that you've been concentrating for a long period of time, half an hour, 45 minutes, an hour, 2 hours, and you're still trying to work out all of these tactical complications. This is how blunders happen, right? You just can't keep it up, So so rook e2 was played. Very natural move. So not only you're threatening the knight, of course, on c2, but you're threatening just mate, right? So Malaniuk is just playing a clear, straight up attack. So how do you defend that if you're white? Because he's threatening queen f2 and mate on g2. So this is why knight e3 is played, defending the bishop, ready to give up some more material. Because white's idea is, hey, I'll give up the knight and then I'll push that pawn to c7, and then I'll make a queen, or at least force black to give up his queen to stop it. So queen f2, king h1, and now rook takes e3. So this gives white a tempo, right? By giving up this piece, this gives white a tempo, and white plays the move c takes b7 with the idea of queening, of course. Now you might say, well, what if just c7 with the idea, of course, rook, queening again. If c7, then just rook e8, rook c1 with the idea of pushing the pawn, queen h4 check, and knight c4. Very powerful move. The idea is that the rook on c1 cannot leave the back rank. That's the whole idea behind that. So what happens is he's forced to capture the knight with the pawn, and this breaks the coordination. This breaks down the coordination between the rook and the pawn on c7, and then he won't be able to queen. Again, this is a sample line. And there's some attack. And I'm not going to go through the whole line, but I just want to show you that black is still winning here. And then once he takes that, then you can see white basically has to start the process over again. And from here, he's not going to be able to defeat that queen with the rook and bishop and these 2 pawns. And analysis continues after that, but I'm not gonna keep going with that. So back to rook takes e3. He plays c takes b7. If you have any questions too, like about any specific lines, or why didn't white do this, or just drop that in the comment. Maybe you can answer it. Maybe somebody else will answer it. And if I don't see that someone answer it, I'll try to answer it. Because like I said, I don't share all the analysis because it'd just be too much. But I'm very thorough as far as double checking different things and lines and such. All right. So rook takes e3 was played. C takes b7. So we gotta worry about this queen. So rook e8. The other rook comes, and of course the idea is if like black got tired and blundered and played a move like rook to b8, for example, then just rook c8. Queen h4 was played. Check, that is, right? King g1, queen d4. King h1, queen h4, just repeating the position. This move 39, so there probably was some time, time scramble type situation, trying to make time control. So he repeated the position a few times. At this point, actually, queen g4 is very strong, hitting this rook right here on the 7th rank. And let's say if rook d c7, the queen h4 again, king g1, check, bishop f1, If rook takes e1, then queen takes e1 check. Bishop f1, and then queen g3 check, picking up the rook. You see, that pawn will never queen. If king h2, again, they're picking up the rook, and that pawn will never queen. And you can see the problem is on the dark squares in this variation. So here will be bishop f1, queen g3, queen h3. And black is basically just going to keep checking and pushing the vulnerable king into positions where he would just continue to drop material or be mated. As in this scenario right here where he's mated. So queen g4 is winning, but I can understand that in time trouble, he's going for the safest option. He repeats the position. So queen h4 check, and now they've reached the time control. Let's move 40. Neverov plays king g1. This is round 11, by the way. This was the last round of the tournament. All right. And they're playing a really hard-fought game here. King g1, queen d4 check, king h1, knight d3, hitting the rook. And some of you are saying, wait a minute, what about rook c8? Well, that's what was played. Rook c8 was played. However, Malaniuk has seen knight f2 check, king h2, knight g4, king h3, queen e3, right? Giving up the knight. King takes g4, h5. This looks like one of those old school games from the 1800s, right, where you force the king on a long, protracted walk. Queen f4 check. King h3, queen g4, and now you can see the problem is on the light squares now. You can see the rook is hanging. King h2, and now queen takes d7. And that's all she wrote. And Neverov resigned. And unfortunately for Neverov, if he won this game, he could have been tied for first place. But instead he lost, and he wound up in third place with 6.0 out of 11. Malaniuk wound up with 5.5 out of 11. But this game right here was a very fascinating game for me. I enjoy annotating. I hope that I was able to pass some of the enthusiasm of this game that I had on to you guys. And also I hope I was clear with the variations. I try to just make enough to where I can explain the position properly, because I know it's frustrating sometimes to see moves and you're just like, well, what if he just did this? So I try to find out what would somebody possibly ask in this situation, and I try to show the variation. I want to go back here though to move 26. Remember, I shared this move with you, and I was explaining to you how black had the threat of rook to e2, etc., queen f2, and then mate. So he played this move right here. Well, turns out this is a critical move right here in the game. Yes, the threat that black had is definitely real. It's concrete. However, the defense, the proper defense is not knight c2. The proper defense is rook d1, and I'll show you why. So first, we're gonna answer just a basic challenge right here. So right away with rook e2, just as in the previous variation with when the knight was still on c2, the queen and the rook, right? The queen and the rook are challenging this knight. Okay, so this definitely has to be taken in consideration. So again, if rook to e2, then just simply queen takes knight. So that kills that idea of bringing the rook to the second rank. Therefore, black would then play knight e2 again, just like he did in the game. F1, king f1. same idea. Rook takes f3, right? Got to keep putting wood on the fire. Bishop takes f3, and now queen h3 check. Knight c3 discovered check. And here's the main difference in the variations. King d2. In this variation, the rook is out of the corner now, and and white has a place to escape the mate. King d2, queen f3. And of course the idea now is to bring the rook to e2 again. Rook e1, queen f2, king c3, queen takes e1. And black, although still down material here, still has fantastic prospects. You know, after moves like rook e3, for example. All right, it's just that this gives white a little bit of breathing room, whereas he's just not getting mated right away. But believe me, black is still holding the cards here, so to speak. So I did want to share with you the correct, or well, the best play for white in this situation. So instead of this move, knight c2, which basically was like a forced loss, rook d1 was the best prospect. And then knight e2, of course, and going into the variations I just showed you. Another idea too is just rook e1 here. But knight e2 is definitely stronger. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed that game. I definitely enjoyed going over it. Again, to me, this 23 bishop d7, man, this is I like that it's number 23 too, because that's Michael Jordan's number. You know, this is like the Michael Jordan move right here, just bishop d7, right? It seems like his back is up against the wall, and you know, he just says, here, take the piece, you know, and it just shows you like the you know how beautiful, you know, chess can be. Very dynamic game, and this is 1990s, man. So we're not at this time. We're not, you know, we don't have any suspicion. We're not like, oh, you know, using Shredder, you know, using the engine, Alpha Zero, any of that. No, this is just the human mind, you know, at its absolute, you know, at its absolute best. You know, two strong grandmasters just going at it. You know, and he says, you know what, here, take this bishop, you know, and be gone. You know, I just love the whole plan, how black says, you know what, I'm not gonna trade queen. I'm gonna go with this attack. This attack may or may not work, but I'm gonna go for it and play queen h4. He could have easily went into the end game here, but he said, no, I'm gonna play queen h4, then I'm gonna follow up with bishop d7 to give you a piece, and then I'm gonna come and checkmate you. And, you know, so that was a brilliant game, you know, in my opinion. Let me know what you think in the comment below. Again, please like, subscribe, check the links below. At the very least, just hit the thumbs up button. Share the videos, you know, on Twitter. Follow me on Twitter. And, you know, get in the comments, man. Let me see what y'all think. Do y'all like seeing the old school games? I know there's a lot of new stuff. I show some of the new games sometime, but I like looking at some of the, you know, quote unquote lesser lights, you know, some of the unknown masters, you know, because they're brilliant chess games. I mean, some of these guys' games are like unbelievable. You know, listen, everybody can't be world champion. Everybody's not going to be top 10, you know, but that doesn't mean there's not some brilliant games out there. To me, this is like one of them right there, you know, just a fantastic game. And, anyway, I hope you enjoyed that, and I'll see you guys on the next video.